Those microphones aren't really microphones for the room, they're for the television. So please go there, always give your name and what you're speaking on. So, next, minutes, Paul?
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of minutes of May 23rd, 2023 as corrected.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you very much, Paul. Next, we have, on the agenda, there's an approval not required, but
It's going to be on the next agenda.
it will be on the next agenda. The applicant has filed a request to withdraw because he needed to do some more work on his application. So we need to approve his request to withdraw. A motion? So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good, we'll move right along. Next, we come to our main order of business for today. The applicant, Michael Galasso, special permit to application for parking with 5 feet for property line at 545 Main Street. And at the same time, we're going to go forward with a site plan review application. Ted, do you want to comment first?
I'll let the applicant open.
Okay, good.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, member of the board. My name is Michael Galasso, 107 Lakeview Ave. I'm the applicant for 545 Main Street, and I just wanted to give you a quick review of the project. The first time we were here was back in December and January. So just to remind you, we are taking the former nursing home, Royal Nursing Home that has 121 beds and converting it into 71 workforce housing units, which will house mostly singles that are employed in a variety of industries, from restaurant workers to hospitality, graduate students at HUI and MBL, visiting professors, construction workers, municipal employees. For many, this could be temporary housing for them when they first come to our community before they find permanent housing. And we think that's one of the main attributes of this project. We'll also house J1 summer employees. And as you may have recently heard, there's a police academy that's going to be constructed, hopefully up in the tech park, which will bring some police officer training that may need some temporary housing, which we would be able to accommodate. So we will be applying for historic designation of the building. We think that it has some historic characteristics that are important to preserve for the community, and we hope that we are successful in getting that designation, and will help with the financing too, and make the project qualify for historic tax credit. We'll be replacing all the existing mechanical systems in the building that are fueled with fossil fuels with all electric equipment. We're going to be installing solar on the roof. Our goal is that eventually we'd like to try to get to net zero. Reusing an existing building helps save a lot of carbon that's emitted when we build new buildings, so I think that's another good attribute of the building. All the units will be fully furnished. The amenities include electric car sharing. I think I've talked about that before. There's a company called Envoy that will provide us with electric cars that our tenants can use. We will also have electric-powered bicycles. Right now, our plans show that there will be 16 bikes. We looked at our plan a little bit closer, and we think that we can provide up to 32 bikes. We think that a number of our residents will be using that form of transportation in the future. As you know, we're also on the Sea Line bus route of the Cape Cod Transit Authority. Other amenities, we have a co-working lounge, community kitchen, laundry facilities, on-site fitness room, and the building will be staffed 24 hours a day by a professional management team. I've already received numerous calls and emails from business owners, restaurant owners, wanting to know how soon that we can open. So I appreciate all the time that you have taken, that Jed and Melinda have taken on this project. I'm going to turn it over to Bob Ament. He's worked very closely with Jed and the staff over the last few weeks, and we think that we've come up with a way to move this project forward. So with that, I thank you for your time and your effort. I think this is a project that the community is really looking forward to, and I know it's been difficult to find a way to move it forward, but I think with Bob working with staff, we might have found a way. So thank you.
You're welcome. We think so, too. Bob?
Thank you. For the record, Bob Ament, and of course I represent the applicant. I wrote a lengthy letter to Jed yesterday, and I believe it was sent to all of you, and it really concerned two matters. One was a process, how to get this project approved, and the second issue I addressed because my understanding was it was the really main substantive issue were parking issues. And of course, Michael feels that the 53 parking spaces which are shown on the pending site plan will actually be sufficient. But nonetheless, we made a couple of proposals in my correspondence. We suggested reducing the number of restaurant seats from 34 to 24 initially. That avoids the need for 5 parking spaces. And we also suggested that we could lease the apartments and let the commercial accommodations units, subject to the condition in many cases that the occupant would not be allowed to have a car. Now, Michael thinks there will be plenty of the occupants for whom that's not a problem at all. And the provision, he thinks that there's a need for 32 bikes, that will be used a lot. The electric car sharing program and so on that Michael just mentioned. So he thinks that 53 is actually enough, but we can reduce the needs by the operation, reducing seats in the restaurant and simply not allowing some of the occupants to have cars. Now, we also think that more parking spaces can be shown on the plan than on the current plan that you have, and I can let me show you an example of that. And Mike Borselli is working on that. Let me try to get back to. This is simply a sketch, and you can see I've colored in green areas that Mike Borselli included in the calculation of pavement. That is, so in Mr. Cod, and one of the benefits of Mr. Cod is that instead of 60% lot coverage under the bylaw, it goes to 70%. So we're a little bit below 70% now with this plan. But those areas I've shown as green don't need to be pavement. They're not parking. And in addition, we've got this whole stretch on the west side of the building that my correspondence suggests that it's really wide enough to have parking, with the fire department having a lane of about 14 feet wide. But the fire department wants 16 feet, so if we can proceed without parking there, I don't think we'll argue that point. But in that case, that's not parking, and it doesn't need to be paved to have a 16-foot travel lane. So we actually have significant flexibility in putting more parking in if we can find places to put it. And there are a number of places. I've indicated those in red. And there's one here. We can have one here. We can show 3 here, and I believe these are all conforming spaces. I believe we can have 1 there. So that's 6 spaces right there. We think with a little bit of adjustment and still keeping the turning radius needed by the fire department, we might even get 1 or 2 more. So we'd be up to around 60 spaces on the site instead of 53, and that will help as well. So how many restaurant seats will we give up? How many of the occupants will not be allowed to have cars? Well, that depends on the final count of how many parking spaces we can have on site, and that doesn't even take into account shared uses, which could be taken into account. So I think we can address parking that way. Now, we have also been talking with St. Patrick's Church, and I've talked personally with the council for the diocese about a parking arrangement next door. Again, remember, we can put some more spaces on this lot. Michael doesn't think we're going to need off-premises parking, but if we have some arrangement where we can have it if needed, that'd be great, and we don't have to start off with these restrictions on the number of restaurant seats or on whether some of the occupants can't have cars. So we're talking with the church. There are a couple of issues we need to address, and we might have that, but we think that the project can be approved without our having that in place because we're willing to make those reductions in need that I've just described. And then later, if we have off-premises parking available, or later if we see that we don't need those restrictions because Michael is right that there hasn't been a need for parking in excess of what's provided, then we can come back to the board. So I'd be happy to answer questions that you may have about the parking issues. And if you have questions about the process issue, we can talk about that as well. What I understand the thinking is that because we need a revised plan from Falmouth Engineering to show the changes to the layout to increase the parking, we will continue, have this continue for 2 weeks. And in that time, the hope is that Jed will be able to work up a decision that would be ready for your vote in a couple of weeks.
Let's take them in order. We've got first the question of the special permit about parking within 5 feet of the property line, and that will affect the count that you got there. So let's deal with that first, if that's okay with the board. It's a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on that? This is allowing parking within 5 feet of the property line at 545 Main Street. No? Okay, board discussion?
No comment on
No
that.
problems?
I don't have a
No
problem.
problems? Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the special permit for parking within 5 feet of the property line.
Second?
Madam
All in
Chair,
favor?
Madam Chair, you'll want to close the public hearing first.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, that closes the public hearing. Now we'll hear the motion. Again,
I move we approve the,
Madam Chair, I apologize. You just need to make a motion and vote to close the hearing. Then you can take up the approval of the special permit.
I move that the hearing be closed.
thanks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, on the special permit.
I move we approve the special permit for parking within 5 feet of the property line.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's out of the way. Now we're going forward to the site plan issue. And where we bogged down, just as Bob has been discussing and Michael discussed also, is on the parking. And I think the board wants to discuss it, and I very much appreciate the letter that you wrote. It really clarified all of the issues, and we have had time on the board to sort of have this whole thing percolate. And before we begin our open discussion with the board, I think we ought to set a context for it. This is really our first major Mr. Cod application. We worked very hard to, as a planning board, to create a proposal to go to town meeting, to have multifamily housing, and we decided the best kind of multifamily housing to have would be mixed residential and commercial. This was debated at some length at town meeting. And at town meeting, the ZBA, seeing that this might cut into their special permit authorities, they stood to speak against parts of this. And town meeting did not go along with the ZBA request to require special permits. Instead, Mr. Cod was to be a by right use within the overlay district. And we feel, I feel, and I hope the rest of the board feels, that this is our opportunity to really defend what we worked hard to get. And so let's do that. So, discussion on the board. You want to volunteer, or?
Yeah, I think it's a real positive step to reduce the number of seats in the restaurant. I also like the idea of restricting rentals to bicyclists. That was an old youth hostel thing. You couldn't stay at a youth hostel if you drove a car there. You didn't. So I think that's a positive move. And I also think it helps alleviate some of the concerns of the business across the street. I mean, he was very concerned about the number of cars that were required for this. And we have spoken numerous times about reducing the number of parking spaces for businesses and et
I
cetera.
didn't hear him say requiring, restricting people to bicycles. I thought it was making bicycles available. Yeah, just so that we're clear.
I heard restricting some of the rentals.
Yeah,
too.
restricting, there was no cars with them, and
Right.
providing bicycles.
Yeah,
So it's-
yeah.
I heard
Restricting
both.
some of them,
Yeah.
Some of them, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that helped reduce the number of spaces needed for parking.
right.
Yeah, so,
Because initially, we were 35 over.
Yeah.
Now it sounded as if we got down to 20 over. Is that right? Because I was listening to what you said.
Well, if the assumption was we needed 88 spaces for the 34 seats and 71 units, we'd be down to 83 by the reduction in the restaurant seats. And by creating more spaces, I think we can get up close to 60. So it looks like the difference is 23 spaces.
23.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Okay, good, thank you. John, did you want to speak on it?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, I really am worried that we work so hard to solve the problems we have. And our town, since we created zoning, has been overparked and underhoused. We literally have giant parking lots throughout our downtown and our district that are never used. And 7 or 8 years ago, we came up with a plan to start working to bring this zoning to the board. And we worked on it real hard, and the important part of the zoning was this by right, so it doesn't go back to the ZBA, and it doesn't go after appeal after appeal. We needed to make it happen. We thought we did it, and now we're being told we didn't do it. So,
Maybe.
well, if that's the case, then I think we're going to go back to town meeting and put ever what a language is, because it's very clear that our intent was this to be by right, period. And we're definitely way overparked in this town, and this is a way to give flexibility to operator, and we definitely need housing. This has been part of our plan for a long time, and this is our, we've been working on it for years.
And here it is.
And this would totally cut it out. If that's the opinion that the other people are taking, we wasted years.
This end? Paul?
Yeah, I like the idea about reducing the restaurant area, because that's causing a lot of the problems. And I think we can waive some issues because of the type of people who are gonna be in the housing there. When you have people 4 bunk beds in a room, then not each one's gonna have a car, for example. So there is some flexibility there. I've asked about this before, didn't really have a definitive answer, but I think there's an effort to try to reduce the parking requirements based on the type of residents that are going to be there. And I think the efforts to provide biking and things like that, I think is a good step.
Pam?
I have a question that I'm not sure there's really an answer to. But when we have folks that are gonna be living in this facility year-round, it makes perfect sense to me to have the bikes in order to get back and forth. What happens when it's stormy and snowy and icy?
They walk.
Yeah. They do what they do in Denmark, they ride their bike.
Well,
So there are 2 alternatives if that's the weather and stuff. Obviously, there's the public transportation, which is the bus. We also have the electric cars that someone can use. Those cars are only for people who live on our property, and they can use them by the minute. They pay by the minute. So that's an alternative. The third is that we are planning on having an electric vehicle. I think I've showed you pictures of that before, the yellow Volkswagen passenger van that will be available too, because we feel that we may have some people we might have to transport down to Woods Hole. So there are some alternatives for people in inclement weather that they would have.
And there's Uber and Lyft, too.
Right.
say that again?
Uber and Lyft.
Yeah, but they're
Yeah.
not inexpensive.
There's buses.
You only need them once in a storm. It's better than walking.
Not getting to work is an employer's
Yeah.
problem also. They'll
Right.
probably help with the solution. Pat?
I like the plan, so this is not negative. It's just that, where are you going to store the bicycles? And I have never had the idea of a rental car. Will it always be on site, since that'll be limited to the,
There are a number, though not shown on here, I think they're shown more on the landscape plan, but there are a number of spots along this area for the bikes. And right now, they show 8 lockers, which are 16, but this morning, we talked to our landscape and site planners, and we found the spot where we can put another 16, so there'll be 16 bike storage, and each hold 2 bikes.
okay, and then
That's how we get
the rental electric car?
It will be along the back. We had one time talked about the whole area along the back of the building would have electric charging stations.
Okay.
Not only for those electric cars, but also for other people who have electric cars. We're gonna see more and more. We're trying to plan ahead and have those installed along the back of the building.
Okay, because the thought occurs to me that that rental electric car will take up one spot, so why not add 2?
I think there'll be 2 of them.
2, how many cars do you plan to have?
Two.
Oh, all right. Where you've got in the corner back there in red that Bob said you could add another spot for parking.
That was planting.
Oh,
That was originally planned for some planting.
yeah, it was, but,
But yeah, so it could be another parking spot as Bob is drawn in.
okay, thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, there were 2 outstanding issues, I thought, at one point. The fire department was concerned about egress from the basement. And I don't know if that's been definitively completed.
Yeah, the wells, the light wells that go down into the basement, those have been enlarged in the current plans in
Okay, so
order
that's
to
been
make sure
taken
there's
care of.
adequate access to get in there.
The only other concern I have is, my fear is that we're going to have some major restaurants or something occupying the entire building. And there's not going to be space for a lot of people we're intending to provide short-term housing for.
You mean that?
To
that
deal with
a-
that, I don't think that's up to us,
Their
but I
workforce.
think it's an issue.
Yeah. I mean, that a restaurant would take up a majority of the rooms. I will tell you by the calls that I've gotten that that's a possibility, because that's the demand. I mean, right now, the Seacrest rents a motel on Mar Vista Avenue that puts many of their employees at, so that's the type of problem that we have right now. That's not the intent. You know, we will have, under Mr. Cod, we'll have some rooms that will be rented on a annual basis, a yearly lease on them. So those probably will not take those type of folks. But, yeah, I mean, we're looking for, you know, a mix. And I guess tell you from my experience on owning and managing, you know, these type of buildings, that we get a wide mix of people who live there who find these accommodations suit their needs. And as long as I've been doing it, you know, I never get it right, that I think it's going to be for someone and someone else shows up, so.
Thank you.
Bob? Bob, before you go, but Michael, what will the impact be on the subsidized housing inventory? Changing from your original application to a Mr. Cod application? What's the impact?
We don't have an answer yet from DHCD on that. Kim and myself have been working with them to find out, you know, how many of the units that they will allow us to count. Most likely the rooms, which will have kitchenettes, and I'm sort of classified as single-room occupancy. We're not sure whether those will qualify, but the studios and the one-bedrooms we feel would.
Okay, approval certainly doesn't hinge on it, but it's always nice if we can add to that.
Yeah, and
that
that
inventory.
question's going to come up as we put together our financing too,
Right.
so we're working on it.
Yeah. Bob, you wanted to speak?
Well, the only thing I was going to add is that Mr. Cod units, under the Mr. Cod bylaw, are required to be year-long rentals, which I think directly addresses the
Right,
concern that
the
Paul made, and it's why I think that Mr. Cod is a lot better for the town for this project.
Well, I'm glad of the solution. I'm sorry that it altered the project in the ways that it has, but it's a good solution. And really, the town needs to, you know, modernize. We do. I mean, there are different ways of getting around. We're trying to get away from cars anyway. A tremendous effort has been made to find alternative transportation options and make them easy for the people who will be there, to make an attractive housing arrangement for the workers who come and go so that they'll be able to eat there also. It just seems like a good thing. There was also, Jed, I think, a question about the uses of the restaurant space. Do you want to address that?
I think it was related to the commercial kitchen, which
It
is
was.
in the basement. So we just wanted to get some clarity on exactly how that space would be used. Our understanding currently is that it would be used primarily to serve the restaurant above it. But there was some discussion about potentially using it as some incubator space for entrepreneurs. So we just wanted to get some clarifying detail for that so that we can prepare the findings and the conditions appropriately.
You're right. Right now, you know, it's planned that it would be sort of the prep kitchen for the cafe. And again, we're looking at a cafe more than a full-blown, you know, restaurant. So, but it would be the prep, because the cafe is so small, 900, I think, somewhat square feet. There's not a lot of room up there for storage and everything. So that's what that space would be used for.
Okay.
Refrigeration, storage, that type of use.
Okay. Any other comments? Pam?
Just one question, Bob. Are these the units that will be available? Are you thinking more in terms of restaurant workers than you are in terms of nurses or fire and police?
We have toured through pretty much every industry you can think of in town, including the hospital, which they think they would have a use for. It's not going to suit everyone's need, you know, but just to have the flexibility of it. So yes, it could be traveling nurses who are here. Even the police chief, when we presented the project, the former police chief to the Chamber of Commerce said, hey, it's great. When I want to hire a new officer and they don't want to move their family here yet, they've got a place where they could stay, fully furnished and move in. So we'll serve that. It could serve teachers too, who are just coming new to the community and maybe haven't brought their family here and just need a place for a few months. So, you know, this is unique because we have that flexibility with this project. Some of the units obviously will have to be rented on a yearly basis, but some of them won't, and they can be rented on a monthly basis. And that gives us that flexibility to house that population we haven't been able to house. So I hope that answers your questions, but again, I think we see a wide variety of people will be able to use the facility.
Thank you.
It seems to me that given the need in all industries, wish we had a whole bunch of these that we could create and open. I don't think there'll be any concern about how to fill them. I think it's going to be too much need. A single employer could fill the whole place, but that's not the intent. My letter addressed the issue of whether a special permit is required from the Board of Appeals. Earlier, the board this evening has made some comments about what the expectations were. I told Jed earlier, it wasn't my intent to go through all of that issue with the board. It's the building commissioner who has to make the determination as to what's required. But the comments of the board, it's not clear to me exactly what you're saying. What is by right? What's unique about this, or everything's unique because it's the first project like it, is that it started out as a totally commercial accommodations project, not a Mr. Cod project. That's how it was framed. I think that was a mistake, and when I got involved, I demonstrated to you how this worked under Mr. Cod, and it works much better. But the question is, the commercial accommodations component of the project, the mixed use, which includes commercial accommodations, restaurant, and the housing. Commercial accommodations is generally, and always has been, before Mr. Cod, a special permit use. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if what the board is saying is that you think that a special permit for commercial accommodations isn't required. It isn't your call, but I think that's what your intent was, is something that the building commissioner might be interested in.
Then I'd like to make it as clear as possible. It was the intent of the planning board when they proposed to town meeting that they would not require special permits under Mr. Cod in order to go forward. The question was raised later of whether or not that covered, because it has always required a special permit for commercial accommodations in the past. But this is not before. This is after Mr. Cod, when it clearly says you don't need a special permit in order to do that. So the question was asked to me, actually, well, who is the planning board to say what commercial means? And my answer was, well, we are, because we speak English. And it said right in that, commercial, this is Mr. Cod, mixed residential and commercial development overlay district. That's what it's about. So I believe it's the belief, and I'd like to be sure that I'm speaking for the whole board, it's the belief of the board that we do not, this does not require any special permit for accommodations, not. Do I speak for the board?
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I don't know how we could be more clear than that. And you're quite right. The building commissioner gets to make that decision. But he has indicated that he was really waiting to hear what we were going to do. And now I hope we've been really clear about what we are going to do. We are going to request that Jed and Melinda prepare for us a positive motion for next time, assuming that you will have finished the odds and ends that are out there, so that we will be able to take a final action on this at our next meeting on the 27th.
Well, I'd like to then add what's really obvious, that the decision of the planning board should be a very robust decision that addresses all the concerns that the Board of Appeals might have if it were hearing this case.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Thank you, and I'm sure the right ears are listening.
If I may?
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, you have a...
Paul?
I noticed the deadline is May 31st. Are we going to extend that? Give us time to...
Oh, I thought it was the 27th of June.
We actually, in your supplemental materials, the applicant has requested an extension of the decision deadline to June 30. So that will cover the next meeting.
So that'll be covered then.
Yeah, so I would just recommend that, if you identify that, maybe just vote to
The
approve
deadline's really June 30.
that extension.
Okay, but you also wanted to make another comment.
I did, and I appreciate the the back and forth on the requirement for special permit. I just want to say for the record, I did speak to the building commissioner this afternoon in anticipation of this topic coming up, and he did confirm with me that a special permit will be required for this project. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so I just wanted to make that clear to the board. And I also wanted to commit to helping with additional language that, to Jim's point, that we can strengthen the Mr. Cod bylaw to make it clear for the next application at town meeting that no special permits, your intent was that no special permits would be required. We can firm up some of that language to make it abundantly clear for the next application.
I'm not understanding why it's not abundantly
Neither
clear
do I.
now.
It was, the whole purpose was to do it by right.
Why is it?
It's turning it upside down and backwards.
Yeah, and so I reviewed every single public hearing video. There was never a discussion about how you would handle a special permit use when considering a Mr.
But when you
Cotto.
do something by right, you don't need a special permit.
So I would advise.
That's the whole point.
I would advise that language be added to the bylaw to make that abundantly clear.
Well,
As does
I
town
understand
council.
it's the prerogative of the building commissioner. Is he required to write an explanation of his thinking on that? Will we
I
be
don't
enlightened?
believe so, but we can certainly talk to him about that, but I think he's made it clear to our staff, to town council, and hopefully through me to you, that a special permit will be required for the commercial accommodations.
I hear that, I just don't understand it, so I would like to see something, I think we all would, something in writing about why that might be. It will
Okay.
just help us in our relationship with the building commissioner.
Charlotte, I would like to have the building commissioner define what the difference between by right and special permit. I've always thought by right means you don't need a special permit. And he's flipped it backwards. And let's look at the definition of the words and how they've always been, and this is convoluted logic. So let's have him here and talk about it and show why he thinks that the words by right does not mean, the special, I thought that's what I always thought that's what it meant.
So did I, Jim.
And so I've been wrong for a long time.
I would advise you that if you have a question for the building commissioner, he works in this building 5 days a week. You can always pick up the phone and give him a call. And you can make an appointment with him to discuss that.
Which we can, but I think that his thinking should be clear to other people, not just to the person who then goes and speaks to him.
Could we have him come here?
We can certainly invite him.
Could we invite him and have him answer these questions so that the public can also understand it?
Sure. I have no problem with that at all. Obviously, it's up to him,
Right,
but
'cause-
you can invite him.
The need to streamline many of our procedures has been evident for some time. This was an effort to do that. This is going backwards on that. To say, oh, but we always do, that's like, yeah, we don't have any intention of changing anything, no matter what
Well,
it says.
I just want to be abundantly clear. So it is also my interpretation of the language in the bylaw that you did not put in the required verbiage to make it abundantly clear that it is a by right process, that uses within the base zoning district don't necessarily require what is required of the base zoning. So I think that there's additional language that you could add to make it abundantly clear. Because right
No
now.
doubt there is, but our question is it necessary when we tried to be clear and it does say by right?
Yes, I guess the answer to your question is yes. I believe that additional language, and it's not just my opinion. I spoke closely with Brian Tobin, our Associate Town Council. He also agrees that the language in here does not supersede. There is no superseding, it's a superimposing. And therefore, the base zoning remains in full effect. And therefore, the requirement for a special permit is still in place.
Well,
That being said,
To follow that logic, the base zoning isn't still in place, then what the hell do you put an overlay district for it if you're not taking care of that base zoning? We're playing games with words here.
No,
Well-
not really, Jim, because the base zoning is there in case something goes away with the Mr. Cod development, then it goes back to the base zoning.
what do you mean in case something goes away? What would go away?
The nursing home burns down, and they decide not to rebuild it. So then that's a, disaster.
Then they'd still have a
And then
choice. to build under one or the other.
They could, but the base zoning is still there.
It doesn't change the overlay setup. John?
Is the request for a special permit only pertain to the commercial accommodation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to make, I
The
wanted to
reasoning
make
is
those.
that we've always required, Falmouth has always required it before.
I understand, but if they were just doing year-round rentals, wouldn't require a special permit. That's what my understanding is.
But that is what's being proposed.
I know it's being
Yeah.
proposed.
Was that taken into consideration?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's the commercial accommodation part that the
Ah.
building commissioner says requires a special permit.
No, the problem is that our Mr. Cod bylaw limits us to 34 units based on the density of 20 units per acre. The mixed use can't be additional residences. If I'll, see what I mean?
I understand that, yes, thank you.
And that's why this sort of works nicely for a mix of longer-term rentals and short-term rentals, for which there's a need for both. The short-term rentals will be done as the commercial accommodations.
So the special permit is required because it exceeds the 20 units per acre? Partly. I know it's more complicated than that, but
There are, I think, a lot of problems with the Mr. Cod project, which then has to go to the Board of Appeals. What are the limitations on the Board of Appeals? Is the Board of Appeals going to look at all the things that the planning board has done? Reducing parking, increasing the density. I would assume that it's clear that the density of 20 is an exception to the density of 6 units per acre, which is usually applicable, or 8 units by special permit. But I believe that it's only because there's a commercial accommodations component to this mixed use, which is a special permit requirement usually. That's the only reason we have to go to the Board of Appeals. But the Board of Appeals doesn't generally just look at one aspect. They're going to look at the whole thing, and hopefully they will think this is a great project, and as it is, and we'll get that special permit. But it will delay the project by 4 months. It will cost quite a few thousands of dollars, and it's possible that the Board of Appeals will impose its conditions. It will, I have a high expectation that it will approve the project, but didn't think we needed to go to do that.
okay, I understand, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, would now be a good time to ask some of the questions that we have at the staff level, or would you like us to hold those questions?
No,
to
go
the
ahead.
next hearing? So I just wanted to follow up on the number of affordable units. I think in the letter, Bob, you had mentioned that the total affordable units would be 9 for this development. Is that?
That's correct. That's the 25% requirement. Do we feel that as we go forward with the financing of the project, that number will increase? Yes, but right now we want to start with 9.
Okay.
And might I just add to that, and it's really part of what Michael just said. Subsidies for units, for apartment units, may only be available in some cases to units that haven't been required to be affordable, that aren't not only the 25%, but more. So Michael wants flexibility. But given the nature of these apartments, the size of them and so on, certainly the rentals are going to be what we would consider affordable.
And year-round?
If they are Mr. Cod units, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
I thought Mr. Card units, as long as 25% of them were restricted, that they all counted as affordable. And I thought the 9 sounds like saying it's 9. I think it's a bigger number than that. My understanding is any of the units would all count if they're rented, no matter what, whether they're market rent or not. Because the intention for doing this zoning was to create apartments. And he's doing exactly what we want. So I think when you say there's only 9, you're not pointing out the real benefit there. How many rental units are there in this?
Yeah, they should all.
They all count.
We don't know that.
Well, just,
Well, Mr. Cod, they do.
But for DHCD purposes, for the SHI, we don't know if they will.
right, so to
But our
clarify,
bylaw said they would.
to
We're not
clarify.
DHCD though. Like, what I'm saying is because not all of the units have bathrooms, not all of them have kitchens. So we don't know how DHCD is going to look at them and if they're gonna count them all on the list. That's all.
So our latest count was 26 units have an exclusive bathroom and a
I
full
like that
cooking
number better than
facility.
9.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
but we just wanted to confirm for
Okay.
the decision what we're writing.
I didn't
in.
want the
That's-
9 to stand. It seemed too small. That's better.
Yeah,
Jim,
please don't misunderstand. That's not.
I got it.
what the applicant is saying is if he makes more than 9 and gets some affordable housing funding,
Right.
those would be deed restricted also.
And if they can convince the authorities that sharing a bathroom still counts because it puts somebody there to work in their workforce, then that counts too, that's great.
Yeah, right.
That's
exactly.
all great.
Other questions?
Yes, so as it relates to the parking, it sounds like, if I'm hearing correctly, you would be essentially asking for a 23 space reduction from the board through the Mr. Cod process. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
So,
Well, the exact number, let's get that plan from Borselli.
and then work that out.
Let's see if you're comfortable with the numbers. And I think Michael's confident that there will be 23 occupants or occupants of 23 units who don't need a car
Okay.
and are quite agreeable to that.
So to that point, have you thought about a way that you're going to make sure that the folks who are renting a unit have the ability to get a space? Meaning, are you going to sort of paint a unit number on the space to indicate that this is only to be used by a certain unit? I guess the question is, how do you prevent the folks who don't have in their lease agreement a parking space from using a parking space?
We have found that designated parking spaces to each individual unit doesn't work, because then when that person goes away and doesn't use the spot, then it's not available for someone else who might need it, whether it's a guest or so on. So we typically don't assign parking spaces.
You know, I think that the comment earlier from Pamela and Jed's comment just now isn't recognizing the fact that a significant portion of the population that's going to occupy this, they don't have cars. This isn't a matter of, I'd like to park my car here, but I can't. It's not a matter of, it's raining, I wish I could drive my car. Most of these people, or a high percentage, don't have cars.
And we don't want them to have cars. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is not accommodate people with cars. There's other means to be able to transport themselves and whatever else they have that's gonna be available to them that maybe isn't available at any other project in town. And we really don't want them to have a car.
I think Michael feels that there'll be enough parking for everybody who wants a car.
So may I, for example, put into the draft decision something to the effect of the property management would be responsible for making sure that the folks who sign agreements that restrict no cars don't actually park on site?
Sure. Yes.
Because I understand what you're saying, but,
Yeah.
you know, we obviously have to think of, well, what happens if they don't, or if they do have a car, so.
You know, you can write lease terms, you can write agreements that tell people what they can do or what, memorialize what they've said they will do. There will be violations from time to time, and about this issue or others, and they'll be addressed.
again, you know, that we're there 24 hours a day. We have an on-site property manager, an on-site assistant property manager, and we don't put up with people violating the rules. Besides the lease, they get house rules too. We just don't put up with it.
I think the concern is that the conditions would give the appearance and maybe actually affect in implementation the abutters' concern about the coming and going and parking. That if there's going to be increased traffic there, that we have thought about the burden that it would place on them and tried to mitigate it to the extent that we can do it.
And remember, there are 71 parking spaces there right now, and those parking spaces were full for the operation of the nursing home.
Right.
So we're actually reducing the number of parking spaces on site by this project. So that should reduce the amount of traffic coming in and out.
And not requiring the project to have off-premises parking obviously reduces likely reduces the number of cars that will be, trips that will be generated from this project.
Last question. The car sharing program, it sounded like the van was going to be one of those vehicles included in the car sharing program, is that correct?
It's beyond that.
It's
So
beyond
It's the two car sharing from Envoy,
Okay,
electric car sharing, and the one electric van.
okay, and could that be rented by a resident and, so would that be like a shuttle sort of situation?
That'll be operated by the property management.
Okay, great.
Do you know
So-
where that would that stay, where the electric vehicles kind of are?
I'd probably see it more towards the front, you know, of the building. Might be a little bit more mobile and stuff, but it will end up at the end of the night being recharged at the back of the building.
Right, okay, yeah, because it's electric, right?
Yeah, it's electric.
That's all we have for now. At least that's all I have for now.
That's all we have. Well, I guess we need a motion to continue to the 30th.
So moved.
Second?
All in
It'd be-
favor?
It would be June 27th, I believe. You're continuing to the 27th and
27th.
extending the deadline to the 30th.
June 30th.
So we're continuing to the 27th, we're extending the deadline to the 30th.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And at
Okay.
that time, we'll have a positive motion.
And they're preparing a positive motion so that we'll have it ready then.
And just for clarity's sake, so I know that you took a vote on the special permit, but it sounded like perhaps that vote was to give us direction to write you a positive motion for said special permit, and that can be read into the record at the next meeting as well.
Does it need conditions? Why does it need more than that?
Well, a special permit is actually an actual special permit, and your typical process would be to direct the staff to develop that motion. We would then give it to you, and you would read it into the record, just like a site plan
Yeah.
approval.
We have a special permit.
And it will probably refer to a new plan.
Okay.
So I understood you to be requesting us to draft that positive motion.
So typical. Okay, good. Now we need to vote on the extension and continuation. All in favor?
Aye.
Done. Thank you. It really is a terrific project, and I thank you for all the time and effort you've put into making it a terrific project. And Bob, for you finding a way for us to approve it and have the flexibility that we should have. And we'll have to work on, for the next town meeting, working on that flexibility. Sometimes. Thank you very much. Okay, next. We have some discussion items. Conversion of the dwelling. Jim, this, I think you're the one with the most knowledge on this.
Well, I read through the comments, the changes. I think we need to decide if we're going to move the date. And I think we need to decide
Would
if
you
we're,
like to explain what we're doing?
okay, I'm sorry. I thought, the bylaw was created in 1984, correct me, I'm going.
Give or take.
Give or take
Yeah,
around
right.
that time. It was,
Well, actually, no, it was in existence in 1979.
oh,
Yeah. That's the
well, I didn't
furthest we
hear
went
about it
back,
till
but
84, whatever.
Nevertheless, it's been in there for a
So
while.
anyways, it was, my understanding, it was brought together to save the big old houses in town that were getting torn down because they were way too expensive. So they came up with this solution. Don't change any of the side, keep it as a big old historic house, cut it up and up as many as 4 places, we get housing, everyone will be happy. That worked. Building codes changed. Dividing buildings up became a lot harder, the rules of doing that. And I think it's become, people don't do it anymore because the building code now requires so many hours of rating, and now they also say, well, more than 3 units, you need sprinklers. I mean, the building code issues have just gotten so hard, they kind of crushed the bylaw and it stopped happening. So we need to make it a little bit easier, and I thought, my understanding was change the date, moving it to making more houses more active, maybe to 2000 or some appropriate date, and also allow for a little bit of additions. Sometimes you just need a couple hundred more square feet to make that bathroom in work, so you get one of the units has a bathroom, that there should be some kind of
So,
small percentage of square foot that we have the flexibility to approve it. And
In your,
so we'll get more.
in your extra packet information is the town meeting article from 1981. This is where the date was added. It's when the date that you're referring to that you'd like to change was added at town meeting. And it was so that only existing buildings will be converted. So that's why they had that date, so, because they didn't want any new construction to be converted. They wanted all the old buildings, like
Was
you
to
said.
save the old building.
Yes, so, I mean, yeah, this was a long time ago. How many years? 40 something now? So, I support moving the date. You just have to figure out the date, if you even want a date. If you want to specify not new construction, or, I don't know, but,
Well, didn't we look, I thought, wasn't a query done to see how many houses? I thought we talked about this.
We did.
Yep.
If we did move the date, how many more what,
oh yeah, that's true.
we talked about that a
We did.
while ago.
Yeah. And you're quizzing my memory, and I don't remember it, but there were, I don't want to misquote it, but, yeah, there were thousands, I want to say. But I wouldn't want to say, because obviously, I don't know it off
But
the
even
top
if
of my
it
head.
was just a few hundred, it would still be a good thing.
Sure.
So maybe we research the date a little bit?
Yeah, we
Well,
have
but
this.
Melinda's proposed something
Oh, I'm
actually
sorry.
more useful, where, why have a date? Just restrict it to existing buildings. And then it's on a case-by-case basis. What's with the date? Well, think about it.
No, I'm just a developer. I can think ways to take advantage of that pretty quickly.
Oh,
See that, well, that's good that you're thinking of all the
Yeah.
Yeah,
things,
right.
because those are things we wouldn't
Oh, yeah,
think
we
of.
get it approved, build it, give me, an 8-bedroom house, here's a septic system, it meets everything, it's only got one kitchen. But you've already engineered, this bathroom could be a kitchen, next
Yeah.
year you apply and bang, you get a 4-unit building in the
no new
street.
building.
No. It would be an old building by then, it'd be a year old by the time they apply. I'm just telling you how it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's helpful to think
No,
of.
but we do that all the time. We have this bylaw that says you can only do 50% of your house in improvements to the assessed value, or you have to complete with the new building codes. So people do, all these 5-year projects around this, you give them away, they'll figure out a way around it. I mean, that's why I think having I just immediately figured a way around it, do it 1 year later. I just wanted to show you that I've already thought of that.
How much later would you have to make it to cut that one off?
I don't know, maybe 10? I don't know. I asked our staff to come up with a recommendation.
So how about we do this? We can give you, at the next meeting, if you'd like, options for dates. So why don't we just do in increments of 10 years?
Yeah.
So we can
Yeah.
do 90, 2000, so on and so forth, and then we can give you the number of structures that would be eligible for that conversion.
10 years has a good sound to it.
Yeah.
Don't we have a bylaw that says if it's an illegal structure and it's been in existence with 10 years, it now becomes, it has a status? I think there's something in the bylaw that says that. I get a lot of,
It rings a bell, but
Yeah, it does.
there's a
so
lot of
I think it's a 10-year
I think it's
window.
there.
It is there. I'm familiar with it. I just couldn't quote a chapter.
That's different from what we're talking about
I know, but it
here.
is the same principle. If it's been there for 10 years, it should be okay.
I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm
So we
getting
could-
at.
We could go to,
The logic is what I'm getting at. Hey, it's been here for 10 years, why not
We
do
could go to
it?
2010 on
Right.
this.
And no one's gonna fool around building something that they're gonna wait 10 years to
Right.
flip it into from a 1 to a 4.
Well, no, you wouldn't write it as a date. You'd say, any building that's going to be used in this way
It
has to have
moves.
been there for
So-
at least 10 years.
So we don't have to rewrite it every 10
Right.
years, the bylaw just
Right.
goes with it.
Don't put a date.
So I think we pick, we
Call
pick
that-
the age, that's a
yeah.
better way around it.
Okay.
The Melinda flexibility.
That works, the Melinda rule, that works pretty good.
Ooh, I
If I
don't think
lived
I've
here
heard
for
those
10
two
years,
words
do I
together
become a
before.
neighbor?
No.
That doesn't work well.
Paul, I wasn't born here, and I didn't graduate from Falmouth High School. I lived here in 1963, and I'm not a native, so good luck.
Oh,
Wash ashore.
There's a couple more.
The summer person, that's even worse.
that's worse.
Some are people, some are not.
So there are a few more issues.
Yeah, let's look at the other issues
Such
that are in here.
as, it states for single residents that no material change to the exterior, including architectural features, is allowed. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think we need some flexibility on that and whether we allow more lot coverage so that you can accommodate more parking, or like Jim says, you're adding on another bathroom or another means of egress, things like that, that would have to be considered.
Well, I believe the bylaw allows additions for egress,
Yeah, yeah.
if I recall. I'm going straight from memory here, but I think it does.
I think that more is a building code,
Would think.
Yeah.
so,
So you want more flexibility in, if I'm reading that right, on the far right, single residence districts 1B, so where it says no material change to the exterior of the existing dwelling, including architectural features, you'd want more flexibility in that?
Yeah.
That one
is-
here?
I think if you do expand the footprint, that it stays in character with the building, that it's not going to look like
Okay.
something that was just,
Well, and it doesn't really materially affect the scale of the building.
Right.
There's no mention in here about parking. What's to prevent a building that's being converted to suddenly having the lot covered with asphalt so everybody can park? Shouldn't there be some restriction on that?
Well, they would still be subject to the dimensional
40%
requirements. Yeah.
requirement's still
Yeah.
there.
So that takes care of
Yeah,
that.
20 and 40 paving is still there, 20 for building, total of 60, including the 40% for paving. I think we should keep that, that really changes neighborhoods, but I think you gotta be able to add a bathroom or a couple hundred, a number. There's, sometimes you just come up with a solution, and all you need is a little bump up, but you can't do it, and you could create a whole new unit.
So would you say something to the effect of adding a certain percentage of the
10% or
existing?
some number, I don't know,
Not
we
to
talk
exceed
about.
10,
You guys
we're
come up
going
with a
10
number.
years, it go 10%, so let's
right?
Yeah, 10, yeah.
keep it
10.
simple.
Okay.
Paul?
I'm just curious, what's the significance of January 1st, 1980? That's,
Oh, it's what
40
they
years
came up
ago.
with at
Yeah,
the time.
that's when it was
Oh, that's
changed in the
because of
bylaws.
this,
That's-
okay.
Yeah.
so that doesn't change.
No, that would change.
Right.
That's the main thing
That's what
that
we
will
want to change, yeah. We want to pull that out and say,
That changes.
Yeah, it has to have been in existence for at least 10 years.
Do we allow more dwelling units? If someone's going to be, they're going to put in 4 units, and 3 is the kickoff for a sprinkler system, would it be more cost-effective if someone would have 5 units, if they're going to have to put a sprinkler system in?
The
And
ZBA
we're
would
talking about
have-
micro units and things like that.
Wouldn't Noreen and the ZBA have some insight on that? Because these questions would have gone to them,
Yeah.
and they would know whether or not that limit has been an obstacle to them, or whether it's worked well.
and then there's more parking too, that
Mhm.
needs to be accommodated
Right.
with
Yeah.
that, but.
I'd leave it at the 4, Bob.
Yeah. I would think that
Because
it
we-
would depend on the size of the lot, too.
It does, but when you're going to 5 units, you're looking at a very, very large building. And if we add flexibility to
I mean,
add.
I'd like to know what the zoning requirements are in some of these areas. I mean, do we have 1 acre zoning in some of these areas, 2 acre zoning?
In the residential one, sure.
Yeah,
I think
so,
what you don't want to create is a rooming house situation where you take the building and you jam in as many bedrooms and
yeah.
bathrooms as you can and stick a stove in one corner.
Also, it's 1 acre zoning now, or 40,000 square feet. However, these houses are typically on smaller lots that were under an old.
Pre-existing non-conforming.
Correct.
We probably should have pictures of half a dozen of these houses, so people know what we're talking about. I'm probably the only one on the board here that can name 2 or 3 of them, because I know them well, but town meeting, no one's gonna understand it, but they would
They're down
recognize.
around the green.
Yeah, there are.
Green and Palmer Ave.
Yeah, and
Shore
Clinton, there's a
Street.
beautiful one on Clinton, there's a beautiful one on Thomas
Yeah.
Lane. There were big old houses, and you can't, you should see how they look now with 4 houses. It looks fine. So maybe we should put some examples out and say this is what they are, so people understand it. Because generally, they're on big houses usually have bigger lots anyways. Even if you had a big house and it had 6 bedrooms, you had a lot of parking spaces because you had a lot of people coming there. So they generally had the parking. I mean, the ones I think of immediately, the big yellow one on the corner of Scranton Ave and Clinton, it's set back there. I mean, that was one of the first ones, and it's a beautiful building, and it looks great, and it's never had a complaint. And there's another one on Thomas Lane. It's kind of tucked away behind down by Surf Drive Beach. It's a big old house. It's been there for a long time. And it's never had any problems. There's probably 5 others, but we should include some pictures so people understand what we're talking about.
I didn't realize there were so many.
I don't know, but those are the only 2 I know. I'm sure there's more than those 2.
Yeah, our understanding from the ZBA is that it's not used a whole lot, but what we can try to do, because there's 9 districts here that it's allowed in, we can give you a breakdown per district of houses that would meet the requirement that would be eligible within the last 10 years, at least from this year. And so we can give you an estimate of how many houses might be affected if someone were to choose to go that route. At least we can try, because that's,
Do we have some sense of how many of these sort of apartment houses that appear to be single-family houses exist now? They must have gone to the ZBA to
I
get...
talked to Ashley, and she's been there for about 8 years, and she said she's only seen a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? I can name a lot of houses that
Oh,
are,
I'm sure there was
that are
plenty
apartment houses
before.
that they're,
I mean, it's been
there's
40
this,
years.
the house that recently sold in Woods Hole that they're making into housing for people who live on Martha's Vineyard so they can work there. That's been apartments for 20 or 30 years. They're all pre-existing, non-conforming, they're already there. And they usually have a lot more than 4 units. Drive on Palmer Avenue, okay?
oh yeah.
Okay, just think about this. Go out Palmer Avenue, and as you're approaching the lights, look to the right and see how many mailboxes there are on some of those houses there.
right.
They're pre-existing, non-conforming. They got 12 units in them.
Oh, the Briggs property is.
Yeah,
full
they're
of them.
unbelievable, but they all existed before zoning.
And I think when we last spoke, you gave me a square footage of a threshold. I think it was it 2,500 square feet that you would need for, roughly, for 4 units? That's actually quite small.
That's quite small, but it's probably not bad. It's probably a little bigger.
Say 3,000?
It might need to be 3,000, I mean, about,
For 4 units.
I mean, if you figure.
actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that. I have sold an apartment building, a pre-existing non-conforming building in East Falmouth, and had 4 units in it, and it was, how big were they? They were, what are they, 600 square feet each? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you,
and it was 4 of them.
Yeah,
So
They're building
that's-
buildings like
that's
that now in
2,400.
Boston.
I mean-
Micro units.
right,
Yeah.
and we keep
So
talking
maybe that's
about-
where I got the number. 2,500 would actually be a doable number.
Why do we have to have a number? We're trying to create more housing here.
it's just to give you a sense for potential impact, right? So if you were to say, you just pick a 2,500 square foot home and it's been around for at least 10 years, we can give you a number per district, how many of those might be eligible to convert into 4 units
So
if they wanted.
this is for numbers, not for the bylaw. All
Correct, just for your discussion.
right, thank you.
Because we actually want to create smaller units, because
Yeah,
we
that's-
kept talking about if you have a smaller unit, you can't charge, X amount that you would for a bigger unit,
That's
so.
just what we're allowing here in
Right,
Michael's
exactly.
project, right?
So, by default, you're kind of creating affordable housing
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Without putting the serious crunch on that it's monitored by the government and they
Right.
tell you who lives there and who doesn't.
Right.
Because that's why the accessory apartment bylaw went nowhere
Right.
for many years. Because that unit
Right.
had to be deed restricted. And no one wanted to do it. And so it's not a deed restriction use, that's,
It's attainable.
yes.
That's the other word that we're using, attainable housing, right? Because it's affordable to the rest, to the,
Yeah.
to the teachers and the police officers, et cetera. It doesn't need to be subsidized.
Yeah.
It's just something that is attainable.
I mean, my first apartment was a studio, and I was living large.
Well, you weren't home in your bedroom with your parents.
Yeah. I was 19 years old.
Are there any other issues that we ought to talk about?
All right, so what we heard was consider a percentage to increase square footage. Change the date to potentially doing something around, it has to be in existence for the last 10 years. We will give you some data on districts by square footage and age of the structure. And then perhaps the red lines that you see on the bottom of this table are those, so those red lines are meant to create consistency in each one of the districts.
Ah, okay.
As you can see, the language in each area, business, public use, and single residence, it's sort of different. And so what we just try to do is make it the same language, if possible. The one exception being the single residence, because that has a restriction on the future number of bedrooms. But again, that would be an item that the board would want to consider. If you want to keep that in place, or if you want to do something different.
Are the units for rent or for sale, either way,
It doesn't say,
the dwelling units?
I'm sorry.
The dwelling units are either for rent or for sale?
Yeah, there's no indication in here about either one.
That's what I thought, thank you.
We're sort of backing our way into recreating rooming houses.
Possibly.
Wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure the board saw, this is the excerpt from the housing production plan. So this is that, item that Jim's been referring to multiple times, and just for the folks at home. One of the strategies that your consultant who put together the last housing production plan said was to consider removing of that date, to allow for more structures to be eligible for conversion to this, in this program, so.
This is the third of the 3 low-hanging fruit that was part of that whole process.
So this is the end of that?
Well, it's the low-hanging part, the
Yeah.
easy part.
I've been saying,
Didn't seem that easy to me, but this was supposed to be accessory apartment bylaw, the multifamily district of conversion were the 3 things, I forget the woman's name, but we spent 2 years with her, and these were all the guidelines, and everybody bought into it, and these were our low-hanging fruit, and we said, let's go get them. It's taken us, is that 8 years ago?
Oh, Jim, I think it's longer ago. than
I
that.
wish it was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a lot of changes. Was there another list beyond that, the not so low?
I don't remember.
Oh, there's quite a bit of stuff in there, yeah.
I only focused on the first 3.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to brush up on the next.
and this backs up what I've been saying for years, two-family homes are among the most affordable types of housing.
Yes.
And yet, we allow these big McMansions to go everywhere where, somebody should be able to put a two-family house on a piece of property. It's for first-time home buyers. Most of the people I know from my parents' generation, they bought a two-family home first. And that's how they were able to pay their mortgage. And we don't do that here. And, I mean, boy, it's been busy, out in East Falmouth, down by Green Pond. Boy, there is a monster house going up down there. And, I mean, it could be a hotel, it's that big. And yet we allow that, but yet we don't allow a two-family home on a piece of property.
Where is that, Bob?
Just at the end of Davisville, there's that little section that juts out onto, alongside Green Pond, on the east side of Green Pond. I mean, they've torn down all I had a lot of students that used to live there because they were these little tiny capes and ranches, and they've all been torn down, and they're all big mansions now. It's crazy.
Well, wait 20 years, they'll be back to convert them into two families.
Yeah.
Are we ready to move on?
Sure.
Committee reports. I look to you, Paul.
There.
No, okay. Any other committee reports? Okay, general correspondence. Oh, excuse me, planning department report. What you been doing?
Quite a bit. We've been very, very busy, but there is one positive announcement. You may have Bob, you mentioned Davisville Road. The planning department, along with our housing coordinator, we're working on what we're calling the Emeralds Property Project.
Right.
And so part of that project is we're rolling out the presentation to a lot of different stakeholder committees, Affordable Housing Committee, to the CPC, et cetera. We would like to present that information to the board, if you'd be willing to hear us.
We would like to hear it.
Yeah. So I was thinking that maybe we would have that presentation sometime in July, perhaps your first meeting in July, which I believe is July 11th, if my memory
I
is
think
correct.
that's correct.
So this is the town's development we're doing?
Correct. So it's two properties owned by the town, just south of the East Falmouth Elementary School. One of those properties is 67 Davisville, the other is number 81. The current proposal and master plan for the two properties includes an all-inclusive multi-generational play space on number 67 Davisville, which is where the current Emerald House is, and the community gardens. And then on the southern parcel, number 81, the plan is to produce some affordable housing on that site. And so through that civic engagement process, we're going to be rolling all that information out to folks and then holding a public meeting, likely in August, to essentially hear what the public has to say about this proposal. And then ultimately report back that feedback to the select board with the intent, provided that, all things are positive, to issue an RFP down the road and transfer the land to a developer and ultimately create some affordable housing down in East Falmouth.
How much land is there?
Available land, roughly 3 acres on 81 Davisville, approximately. Same on 67 for the play space.
And you're to be allowed to put up 8 units per acre?
Well, so it's anticipated that it would be a 40B
40B.
project, right?
So it's whatever they can fit.
Right. Obviously, there are concerns about water quality, and that has been driving affordable housing development for a while now. So balancing those two things is really important.
What is coming along as far as Kimco is concerned?
Algae and green.
So Kimco, sounds like they've got 2 issues at hand that they're trying to work through. They've got a building height issue and a potential front setback issue with the building. So we're going to be meeting with them,
What's the second one?
front setback.
Ah,
Building setback from the road. So we're gonna be meeting, staff's gonna be meeting with them tomorrow to sort of hash out some of the details of that. And we're hoping that, they can move forward with some type of solution, whether it's to maintain a Mr. Cod project or to go a different route. But my sense is they're committed to the project, so,
and yet they're trying to
see.
rent the Friendly's building. They're not
Not
gonna
really.
make that,
I.
oh,
No,
that's a fake sign?
that side's
Been
been
there
on
for a
there
while.
for years. There's 2 different, because I was trying to rent it, okay? And
Yeah.
I had a tenant going in there. They really weren't trying to rent it. If they get the right tenant for it. But they have a leasing group that's out trying to lease all they can, and they have a development group. And this project has moved into the development group's hands. And they're the ones that the town is working with. The leasing group still wants to rent it because they get paid a commission. It's just the way the business works. So it's whoever could put, I'm sure if they could get a tenant that would fit in there by right and get approved real quick, they could kill the other project, but they don't have one.
Oh,
And they don't have one because the math doesn't work. That's why Friendly's died. So it's a a business thing that's going on.
And you think that it will be resolved in favor of the mixed
I
residential?
hope so. I do have, I thought about what's happened. When we originally envisioned this thing, we had lots of little buildings. Okay, they were, they were scattered around. So as you go up the hill, the next building will be taller, and the next building
Yeah.
taller, and the next building will be taller. These guys came up with the one idea of doing all one building, which I said, I didn't like it at first, but they said economies of scale, it's what we have to do. And I thought about it, said, yeah, but think about that. As you move up the hill, those buildings, the floor levels change as you go up the hill, they can't be connected. If it was all one building, the back half of the building would be 5 feet in the ground because the land rises up. There's a slope issue that's creating, you can't put a sloped roof.
Right.
The roof would have to be like this. So to have the back and the front be equal, it's gonna be more, it's be like 40 feet in the front and 35 feet in the back.
And therefore, they changed their mind about the one building?
No, they haven't, but they want to change their mind about the height. Because the big one roof, think about it, if you were just putting in one big building and the roof was all the same height, as opposed to a lot of little buildings, if the land slopes.
Aesthetically, one big building, it's going to look like a big box store. That's not a
Correct.
good thing.
No, it isn't, but it also, the math, that's how they do it mathematically, it's a lot.
Yeah, but this is a design issue. It can be one building and yet still appear to be at different levels.
And we've been selling this as something that's going to be an attractive.
Maybe they can come up with the design issue. I was just describing what happened that I didn't take into consideration when they switched from many buildings to one building, how the slope of the land would impact the roof lines.
Architecture can take care of that.
Right.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
No, they let them, but that's the issue. Isn't that what they're saying?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a bit of an issue with the topography of the front of the site, so, and to what Jim was describing, it's an
I didn't foresee it.
They're going to have trouble aesthetically with the building, trying to keep one single roof line all the way for that massive building.
Yeah, I don't recall the exact detail of the elevations, but I don't believe it's going to be a single mass along the edge. But like I said, they're still meeting with staff, so we're going to try to help them out as best we can. Make them
At what point would we see what you're up to?
So if they figure out their issues with the building height and they still want to proceed forward with the Cape Cod Commission, that's just like the solar project. It would come to you as an application first. You would then refer to the Cape Cod Commission. It goes away for a period of time, and it would come back, and then you would have your hearings, and you'd be able to approve it or, see it as a Mr. Cod application.
How's
So
it
it's
coming
still a
along
while.
with the Cape Cod Commission? We were going to get relief on that business of things having to go to them. Remember, what was that called?
That was the growth incentive zone.
Right.
Yeah, so only because we've got other things going on, we've had to sort of put that down on our working list of items to do, but it's still in the mix. We just haven't had time to work on it lately.
When you all meet with Kimco tomorrow, it is tomorrow, you said, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Can you please underline that we really want to see some architectural niceness about it? Remember how we did a pushback on the rentals over there on Clinton and Maine?
Yeah, Main and Scranton, yeah.
Yeah, Maine is, sorry. So, and like 704 has different facades, where you can do differing roof lines too, and make it look not just this big block.
Sure.
Because I don't think this town would find that acceptable.
No,
No, that will look like a
No, and-
tenement.
Yeah,
and that would, I think that'd be a bad reflection on us.
it
Yes, it
surely
would.
would.
I think they're aware of what
I think that-
the town would prefer.
Well, just make them aware of it for sure, any
Yeah, we
chance you
gave
get.
them the example of 704 Main Street. This is months and months ago.
704
We
is
said-
on a level lot.
Yeah, well,
But
we said,
the architects can take care of it.
Yeah, they could put a break in it,
Yeah.
step it up and
Yeah.
put another, make it into 3 buildings. It's not as effective, but it still works.
so, I mean, what we can do is sort of report back after this meeting, and we can give you an update at the next meeting if you'd like.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Does anyone know what's happening with Liberty Green?
My very limited understanding is that they're perhaps is a settlement coming soon, related to, an abutter suing or appealing the process. That is my very limited understanding. So it's possible that we may see a settlement soon. That's really all I know.
A settlement along what lines?
So my understanding is that, because I wasn't here at the time, so my understanding is they went through the process of doing the 40B application. It was appealed. They went to hack. I think it came back. There were some modifications, and the butter may have appealed after that. And so it's still in court, is my understanding. But it may be coming out very soon. Again, that's very limited understanding. I'm not involved in the project at all, so I would not take that verbatim at all. I could have that horribly wrong. So if you have questions about that, you can certainly ask the zoning board of appeals, the zoning administrator.
Because I wonder if the result of it is they then go ahead and build the thing that they wanted to build.
It's possible, yes.
Well, that will be the result.
Mm.
When the lawsuit's over, that's what happens.
Provided that the
Well,
developer decides to move forward,
and-
yes.
You know, it's two sides to it. Is that,
I told you what we did in Acton
Bottom out.
with the owner. We bought him out for $1 million. Very happy to get that $1 million. That ended.
I tried to get the town to buy the phase out 5-6 years ago. I said, let me negotiate this, let's buy them out, and they didn't want to do it.
didn't do it? No, so that idea was,
Phase.
Lantern Lane.
Lantern Lane, that development right there.
I don't know what
general
that is.
correspondence?
Only one in the packet, I believe it's from the Cape Cod Commission related to the cable 91, or the 91 cable replacement project.
Right down on Surf Drive?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, so they'll be holding a public hearing soon.
Okay, future agenda items. We'll be hearing back for the things that we just discussed. That'll be good. I'm wondering, we had discussed, it must be close to a year ago, how we needed to get going on our 5-year plan, to update it to the Cape Cod, bad face. To update it, I thought you were making a bad face.
I was thinking 5-year plan, look, we're.
Yeah, to the Cape Cod Commission's new requirements, or preferences, I should say. And we really shouldn't lose track of that.
It's the local comprehensive plan you're talking about.
Yes.
Yes.
The local
Yeah.
comprehensive plan. And coming up with, I know we're trying to finish up on the recodification phase 2, but we ought to be thinking about getting organized for that and how we want to do it. So, who on the board is likely to want to work on that?
The LCP?
The LCP,
Yeah.
I volunteered for that, but I think you need to concentrate on the bylaw first.
Yeah, I
And-
agree.
And this winter, or late fall, start with the LCP.
Not till the fall?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, we'll be thinking about whether or not you want to work on it.
We got a lot of loose ends
Yeah.
on our bylaw, and it needs,
Yep.
or changes we might have to do, and I think we should just
And that
make
might
a-
affect some of the stuff with the LCP, too.
Get that done first.
Okay, I just don't want it to,
No,
Completely
it's actually been on my mind,
evaporate.
so.
And our next meeting is June 27th.
Yeah.
Will I be here?
I think so,
You want
God willing.
agenda items?
Yes, that's what we're doing.
Okay, well, you said next meeting, I thought you skipped
Oh,
over.
well, I didn't know you had an agenda item. Go ahead.
Yeah, some time ago, early May, I asked about the solar panel projects in town. And then I was told there was only 3 of them. I see about 5 of them been approved and 2 more have been proposed. So I redid the table a couple of weeks ago, and I'll see if we can work out and come up with details that are in his, because they've come before the board, so it shouldn't be that difficult to do. And if you want, I'll come in and work with you to try to do that, but
It'd be a great idea.
but, we know what they are. We don't know all the details, but I filled out best I can, but it should be relatively easy to do that because they've, in most cases, become before the board.
Okay.
And I don't know why, I think I sent you this, but
I don't remember receiving it.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it several weeks ago.
Yep, but I
And
don't
sent you a
remember.
copy of the latest one
Yeah.
there. It'd be nice if somebody said, you know, what are the solar panel projects in town? The planning department should have that. And then we start doing other projects, we might want to look at those and guide us a bit. Because there'll be more coming. And the case of the one on 151, that keeps growing and growing and growing. I don't know how many approvals there were on that, but that seems to be, every time I drive down, it seems to be bigger.
The fairgrounds?
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
we approved it.
It's enormous.
Be nice to know how big they are. Jim has two of them there, phase one and phase two, but
I have an agenda item. I brought up something back in January about the certain language we have that's in conflict, and we're doing it, and I was asked to be patient, and that we would soonly put on the agenda and have the legal department here have a discussion with it. I brought that up January 9th, and I have been patient. I stopped getting upset about it, and everyone said, give us a chance. I'm not forcing you, but I want it to be on the agenda at some time in the next few months. And because we have some issues with language that needs to be resolved, whether it's policy, whether we have the right to ignore it or enforce it.
Well, we're,
Yeah.
we're working on that. We're not.
I know, but it should be an agenda item in the near future.
Yep, we'll put it on.
You asked for agenda items, I
Yeah,
thought, I
that's
just want to
fine.
remind you, that's all.
How about the end of July?
Whenever you want to do it, it's fine with me, just don't forget about it.
Of 2024.
Yeah,
No one wants to deal with it, it's hard.
It is a challenging topic. We thought we had, not to talk about it because it's not on the agenda, but we thought we had a solution, and things came up this week that we just need to do more research and just make sure
There's
that
lots of research involved.
it's a lot.
I've always wanted to have, whenever we've had the discussion, none of us could decide because we had to have the town council here and have a hearing and talk about it. We haven't done that.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some examples
It
that we'll
just
be
keeps
sharing.
coming up, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Paul?
yeah, on another item, we spend a lot of time on the Staples Plaza looking with urban studios and so forth, and I understand the developer's gonna do something different. It'd be nice to get an update on what that was, because we spent an awful lot of time
Just talk about it.
trying to look at what urban studios are doing, and trying to do a lot of things with them,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, it ended.
Yeah, so and we can add that to a discussion item. I won't provide any detail, because again, it's not on the agenda, but
Sometime we ought to be able to do that, not immediate, but
form-based code.
I'd like to get it on the agenda
Yeah,
in
but
the
if
future.
Kimco comes in.
That was the
Take
Kimco
that over.
discussion, Paul.
Right.
That is
That's what
Kimco
we're
and
talking
Friendlies,
about,
yeah.
But we spent a lot of time on it.
We did, and they were going to give us a completed proposal, and nothing happened. And yet we paid them.
They did give us a draft bylaw for consideration. You just have to remember, when they gave it to us, we were just taking over the department, so
Right.
we had that long discussion with the board about priorities and setting priorities. That's why the LCP was moved. It's just, there's a lot going on, so it's difficult to stay ahead of all these special projects.
I just want to give a little bit of feedback, because I do talk to a lot of people about commercial property development, and I've always been pushing Mr. Cod and friendly 40Bs. And all the developers I talked to said, Falmouth isn't friendly, you still have to go to zoning board of appeals, and they still rake you all over the coals. We just want to go ahead, get it done, have the state give us approval, so we don't have to deal with the Falmouth rules. So even though we're trying to open the doors to them, they actually find 40B friendlier than our town. And I believe that that's what's going on with the plaza. Bob alluded to it, that they just can go 40B and not have to argue with us.
Well, it's not necessarily that. I mean,
That's a mindset I wanted to share with the other board members that the developers have taken on about dealing with our town. They actually think 40B is easier than Mr. Cod or a LIP.
well, I think it's easier because 40B allows you to basically skirt the rules.
Right.
And there are rules in place that control development, so if they
Just
want to
wanted to
get
point it
around
out
the
that
rules.
that's a fact of life.
Well, it looks like they're gonna do it again.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. We'll see.
Mr. Street might change his mind.
Oh, you're getting back to the 545. Sorry, I thought you were talking about Kimco. I apologize.
No. Yeah.
At our Affordable Housing Committee, the issue of, it'll come in a second. The issue, of form-based zoning came up, and how important it is for us to move ahead with affordable housing to have that zoning changed.
Mm-hmm.
So, just an FYI.
The big emphasis when I was working on it was because we had included it with Mr. Cod. And when we segregated out and got Mr. Cod, we got 80% of we wanted approved, and it kind of took away the drive for the whole thing. And John pointed that out, said, Jim, why are you fighting for the form-based code? Let's get what we need and go after it. So we actually, that kind of did take the wind out of the sails of doing the form-based code, because it is harder. It
Yeah,
does
and
cost
then
more money.
if you want to bring forward form-based code, you have to consider how you incorporate Mr. Cod, so.
Or
It's-
maybe we just have much more stricter design review, site plan and design review, instead of calling it form-based code, is another way to do it.
There may be, but the thing that form-based code adds that we keep, sort of overlook, because we keep talking about building forms,
Yeah.
is that it really adds the requirements about how the street is going to work.
Right.
So it's all about the relationships of the building and the relationships of the buildings to the parking, and creating that mix, and how you're gonna landscape it so it all works together. And you don't get that if you just do,
I agree.
yeah. So we don't wanna lose it, but it's true, we've got a lot of other things going, but we, time stretches out. Paul?
Yeah, we got a thing from the Barnstable County about the cable replacement coming down Surf Drive, going over the vineyards.
Right.
Why
Jed,
is this in our packet?
maybe you didn't catch it. Jed, you wanna repeat that part?
So the Cape Cod Commission is sending that to the board to notify them that there'll be a public hearing coming soon. So
There's no
attached,
date of public hearing on this. I didn't see a date of public hearing on
I
this.
don't believe they have one yet,
Yeah.
but attached to that is the certificate from the MIPA process, which triggers Cape Cod Commission review. And that notice is just putting you, making you aware that a public hearing will be coming soon.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Good meeting.
Come up with something else.